So in a recent video, I spoke at length about how Ranged DPS used to pack powerful utility kits that look vastly different from what we currently see in Shadowbringers. And honestly, I got a lot of questions about that, and so I figured, hey, why not actually sit down and talk about what we see in terms of the Final Fantasy XIV's Ranged DPS utility kit, and specifically only utility. We're not going to dive into like the rotations or nothing, we're just talking pure utility here. Like, what can you offer to the party in like a Savage raid? And I think that this is also a very important question because it's not that often that you hear it anymore, but you still do hear it brought up every so often about ranged DPS being quote-unquote utility DPS. And so I figured this is probably going to be useful. So this video today, I should say, is just going to be talking about the utility kits of today. And so I've rated all of the tiers of Savage of this expansion on ranged DPS and tank. And so I was really wondering, like, why don't I do a video on this and just be on my opinion. Mind you, this is going to be highly opinion based, highly subjective. This is me speaking on my experiences, and hopefully people can forgive me if I'm wrong, but this is just my experience, I'm sorry. But enough of that, let's talk present utility kits today, because that's why you're here. Currently, ranged DPS all have a form of party-wide 10% mitigation. While they are under different names, they all function the exact same way. And so this is going to be Troubadour, this is going to be Shield Samba, this is also going to be Tactician. For the sake of discussion going forward, I'm just going to call them all Tactician. All ranged DPS also get access to Head Graze, which is an interrupt that is exceedingly useful for fights like E1S ads phase, or ads phase during Shiva Savage, because honestly, you don't want that Earthen Karen Aether to be getting that shield. So absolutely hallelujah that we have this as a DPS. And to a much lesser degree, we do have abilities like Bind and slow skills like Foot and Leg Graze. Not that useful in my experience in Savage content at present, but when it comes to world content or deep dungeons like Pass of the Dead or Heaven on High, where Machinist is considered one of the best solo classes, right up there with Red Mage. Most tier lists are putting it right there. I don't know if I'd agree, but it's not too bad to solo, I have to say. But honestly, people are like, this is huge for even Pass of the Dead, just because of its kiting ability with these abilities. So would I call the Foot and Leg Graze abilities useless? No, but they aren't necessarily utility for Savage raids. Lastly is a fringe outside of Savage utility ability, because you can't use it in the middle of combat, which is called Peloton, which boosts the entire party's movement speed, which when you're dungeon crawling, like you're doing those deep dungeons like Pass of the Dead, or you're doing an expert, honestly, you are doing a lot of movement, and so it actually is tremendously useful, and I think it's one of the most underutilized abilities. When I have another ranged DPS in the party on Scholar and I don't see them use it, I'm like, inside. Not that I call them out on it, but I'm like, come on, it's so much running, help. And ultimately, to round out all of the ranged DPS's shared utility, I kind of want to talk about in Savage how the only thing that we are consistently bringing in terms of utility is really that 10% party-wide mitigation through Tactician, which I need to be super clear. Is that strong? Absolutely. I've done E12S where like the phase 1 is, especially like during something like Titan Junction, where you need everyone to scatter to their rocks, then come back, then scatter to their rocks, then come back. It's so much healing going out into the party that yes, 10% is going to be helpful. It might not necessarily be make or break, but it's going to help people stabilize a lot quicker. But also, Magic Caster DPS brings Addle, which lowers the mind and intelligence attributes of a particular target, which is incredibly useful. Incredibly useful. Even if it is only intelligence and mind, that still has been such a godsend to have as an ability. Not to mention melee DPS also get the strength and dexterity equivalent called Feint. While these are to a particular type of damage, they still are extremely powerful, and so when push comes to shove, I'm not really sure if ranged DPS having this umbrella kind of damage mitigation makes them that much more of a quote-unquote utility DPS than these roles. I say that specifically for like present day content because I'm not really getting the feeling that that's gonna be like, oh wow, we want a ranged DPS for this. Instead, I'd say that if we're looking at current day Savage content, that the real utility that ranged DPS brings is literally their range. The fact that they can be flexible and you can really play around with where you position your ranged DPS player, especially, or how to say it, if your group isn't necessarily following a particular already planned out guide that tells you exactly where to go, leveraging the ability to move around and be able to like pinpoint where certain mechanics are meant to be and open up the window for melee DPS or for a black mage to stand there rooted casting it's huge. I'd argue that the range would be more the form of the utility, and the flexibility of that player would be more the utility than necessarily any utility in current day content, which I don't know if that's really the most satisfying answer, but that's kind of where I'm at with that for the ranged DPS role, quote-unquote, utility as a whole. Now I want to move into class-specific utility rather than go into that discussion, because I think that the quote-unquote relevance of each role in Savage content could easily be like a 2-hour-long video per role, because there is a lot of justification on why a melee DPS, or why a Dragoon. Why would you want a double melee DPS comp? Why would you want maybe even 3 different ranged in your group? And there's a lot to go in there, and that's not the point of this video. So specific utility for specific roles, I am going to be starting out with Machinist. Machinist gets no more utility, so rest in peace. Although I think that that is honestly a good thing, because Machinist does bring such a personal pack of damage, and I really like the fact that the Machinist is a very standalone, very independent DPS class that doesn't necessarily give away some of its damage through things like party-wide buffs, whereas the Dancer and Bard really does give a lot of their personal DPS away in the form of songs or through dances. The Bard gets a lot more interesting because we are getting 2 unique utility skills called Nature's Mine, which boosts the healing done to a single target significantly, which in theory could help healers recover from a tank buster easier. And in theory, the numbers do agree, like 20% more healing is very significant. That's huge. But in practice, through my experience, it's usually not as useful as you could hope, because most groups will bring along a white mage these days with Eggs Benedict to fully heal off a tank brought to 1 HP. The second skill is called Warden's PN, which can be precast to remove the next removable status affliction on the target, which is absolutely strong and sounds very unique, or rather it sounds extremely strong, and if we had fights using that kind of mechanic, it would be extremely powerful, because it is unique, as it is also the only class that can also remove a status effect outside of healers with specifically Asuna. Rest in peace, Celine de Leon for scholars. But the real fact is that in Savage fights, using Warden's PN is very, very difficult, because even if you could say dispel Shiva's required dispels like really early on in Shiva, you need actually even really late in Shiva too, just to correct myself on that. There's required dispels through the fight. You can't really pre-plan to really make use of this effect, because you're not really 100% sure who it could be. Like if you really planned with healers that, like, okay, me as the Bard, I'm gonna dispel the bottom from the list. Okay, that might have been useful, but by and large, in my experience, the skill is not used in raiding at all, which leaves the Bard's current utility in this very weird fringe spot. While the effects might be powerful, it is also very difficult to use them properly or have them noticed, which I think that a lot of times, even if the numbers might back up the fact that Nature's Mine could be a strong skill, perception is huge. And honestly, oftentimes, even when Eggs Benedict is down and there's an incoming burst of damage like E12S's first phase dual tank buster with the like slashing piercing damage on the 2 tanks that need to swap, like that's a lot of damage, and that's slamming both tanks into the dirt, honestly. I'm honestly told that my Nature's Mine isn't even noticed. Honestly. And Warren's PN is honestly just such fringe usage, as we brought up before, that it leaves me with the feeling of bringing utility as a Bard very, very far from reality. In fact, I'd argue that Mana Ward from Black Mage sees more usefulness in raid than these abilities, because if you take excess chip damage or you're out of range of the healers for something like E12S's Time Junction phase with meteors, for whatever reason, I mean, especially if you're progging, that can be really difficult, because sometimes the healers only spam some heals and Black Mage things. I'm trying to learn Black Mage now, and so my excuse for everything is Black Mage things. But the point is, like, Mana Ward can at least save yourself and like prevent them needing to revive. Whereas Wander's PN, I trade in Wander's PN right now for Mana Ward. Instantly. Now I want to talk about Dancer, whose utility is improvisation, which will increase the healing done to allies by 10% if they stand in the effect. And that's a big if sometimes, especially with pugs. Y'all, if you're a Dancer, you know what I mean. Sometimes it's a real wild card. Which, in theory, I want to say, like, if everyone is standing there, in theory, is very solid when people are stacked together. And that is primarily where I use it, of course. And even if there isn't going to be, like, a downtime phase, I will, like, intentionally weave it in randomly between attacks when there's a stacked burst of damage, just as a little boost to healing. But where theory disconnects from practice is that this skill's best usage most of the time is during phase transitions with no future incoming damage, because the boss is like, let me go away, look at me, I'm scary, I'm going into like my third phase, So that means that your healers don't really need to burst up the entire party's health because there's no damage coming in, because there's that phase transition, so you can't really attack the fight. There's no incoming damage, and so the real need for a heal boost with something like, say, White Mage's Temperance is that you urgently need, well, with Temperance you need the mitigation obviously, but where you need a healing boost is like where you need to heal immediately. Like there's an urgent need of like, if I don't get this threshold of healing out, I'm going to be in trouble. Which, using this skill in a phase transition, that's not useful. That's not as useful as you could hope. So where you really do use improvisation, though, is where you want to charge up your Esper gauge for extreme bursts of damage with Saber Dance, which is powerful. And absolutely, good luck finding someone that would call it not powerful. But would I really call this party utility? No, because I'm going to be honest. Sometimes I feel like 10% healing when stacked, which is super temporary but does last, it seems with server ticks kind of like 3-ish, 4-ish seconds if I'm lucky, which it is a temporary buff, and because I weave it off of the global cooldown, it almost feels like I'm really making myself feel better and useful rather than actually helping. Kind of like a big old placebo button, if I'm being super honest. Now, the second unique dancer ability is Curing Waltz, which I would consider probably the best example of utility that we have in Shadowbringers for ranged DPS. It's 300 potency healing on yourself, which is not impressive. It's fine, it's useful, I'll take it over Wanderer's PM, raids for sure, Nature's Monet actually. But until there's some dispellable thing, then as soon as we actually have a use for Wanderer's PN, like the pre-planning dispel, oh my god, I want that. But we don't have that. So I'll trade in Wanderer's PN for this ability, hands down right now. But I say this skill is useful because this skill has the stacking effect where it's 300 potency on yourself and your partner, meaning that if you and your partner are stacked up together, that is 600 potency of healing off the global cooldown, which 600 potency is just a smidge over a single Cure 3, and a White Mage Cure 3 is very expensive, very, very expensive, and it's mana intensive. Usually when I hear White Mage saying that they're going to be using Cure 3 spam, usually that's followed by them blowing the big cooldown thin air to reduce mana costs from that. But further from just like 600 potency is that it can heal the entire party in that area, because you're emitting a cone, like a circle around yourself, not a cone, and then your partner's emitting a circle around themselves, which can hit the entire party, meaning that you can heal 600 potency over everyone in the party, and that is like 2 Medica 2 values worth of a heal off of a single off global cooldown that costs no MP and no effort on your healer's parts. And I need to say, honestly, over all of the rest of the utility brought by any ranged DPS, in my opinion, and I'm not saying Tactician's useless, but in my opinion, this has been the one form of helping that I've seen the most recognition for a lot of the time. Outside of obviously like saving Tactician for something like E11S's like Electric Cycles phase. I mean, Fire Cycles phase, who cares? Like, that's manageable, or Holy Cycles, that's manageable, but when you have that spread with Electric, oh my god, that it makes such a huge difference. That is like nightmare fuel. But one of the things that I want to talk about with Curing Waltz, getting back to Curing Waltz, is that you can double weave this with improvisation between a single global cooldown, because you can fit 2 OGCDs between 2 GCDs. So you get that 10% increased healing plus this Curing Waltz for 660 healing to the entire group. It's only 60 more healing, so it's not mind-boggling. As I said, like, it kind of makes me feel better, but it's not gonna make or break the fight, obviously, though. Even if you do this, like, obviously your healers are gonna heal it. Obviously this is on like a 60-second cooldown. Like calm down, Glen Koga, it's not changing everything. But for costing nothing and requiring no effort from the healers to execute, there's no reason why stacking this and using this once every minute should be looked down upon. In fact, I'd argue that this is, in the current state of Shadowbringers, the best representation of ranged DPS utility today. 660 potency heal, especially during more heal intense moments with stacking like E12 E12S, like Titan's Junction, I think we'd honestly be hard-pressed to find a healer say that that's useless. Heck, me as a scholar looks at that, which I'm hoping that I can get honestly back to more healing with maybe a second raid group. But me as a scholar looks at this potency, and that honestly can save me an emergency tactics Sakura combo. And that, just for anyone that's not familiar, is Sakura is normally just a little heal with a little bit bigger barrier, higher potency barrier, just a smidge. And so emergency tactics turns that barrier into another heal, and so really it's helpful. Basically, Curing Waltz can do a lot to offset my stress as a scholar if I know to plan around it. That's the key thing. Anyhow, that's kind of where I want to end this video, because I think that that's a positive note, because Curing Waltz. And so that's kind of my video on the current state of Ranged DPS Utility. So in the comments section, let me know what you think of it. Honestly, I know that this is just my opinion and my experience, but I'm not really sure that ranged DPS is really a utility DPS more than maybe I'd call them right now a flexible DPS, because when we're talking about things like melee uptime, or we're talking about like spread markers like lightning markers, or the fact that you need to spread during like E12S with the Shiva junction, well, not the Shiva junction, the Shiva little ice explosions, that I think is where the quote-unquote utility of ranged DPS is really allowing your black mages, really allowing your melee DPS to go in and whack the boss. I don't feel like ranged DPS in their current form actually offer that much things in terms of like pure utility. Like, we are not doing things like mana songs. So honestly, I'm kind of gonna leave this video on that note, but that is gonna be a future video, because I just caught myself going on like this, and then Machinist had promotion, and then Bard had froze Requiem. We're stopping here. But anyhow, don't forget to cat daddy that subscribe button and toss an MP restoring skill for ranged DPS at that like button. Mage's valid or promotion, either one is okay. Anyhow, take care everyone and be great.